Dude, I've seen how you chair meetings. It's not a democracy, and it isn't an open symposium. In many ways, I'm happy for you, and I don't want to discourage you. If you and your girlfriend are living your dream, go ahead. For anyone else attending those meetings, the situation is follow Jordan or get out now. And that's fine. But that's not what a campus vegan group should be. But this is the funny irony. When he first proposed this to me, he said, hey, will you sign this piece of paper to be a founding member for the University of Victoria Vegans Group? I said to him, look, man, maybe I was 36 at the time, whatever it was. It's a bunch of years ago. I said, look, man, I can sign this piece of paper, but I've got to tell you, student groups are for students. Some of these people are going to be 19 years old, and, if they know me, if they know my YouTube channel or something like that, I can show up and be like a speaker or something. I can show up and say hi to people and leave. But no, I'm not drinking beer with students. I'm not smoking weed with students. If you guys don't know, I never drink beer. I never smoke weed anyway. But dude, student groups are for students. They're not for a grown-ass man in his 30s like you, Jordan, to try to recruit followers for his off-campus political group, which is exactly what you tried to do. Anytime you have to ask yourself an ethical question like this, imagine it was some other political party. What if it was a right-wing group that was doing what you're doing here, Jordan, that was trying to recruit university students into an off-campus group by having an older man in his 30s? What if it was a left-wing group? What if it was a communist party? The youth wing of the Communist Party sends in an old guy like you to control a student group in the way that you're doing. You'd say, oh, that's kind of weird, that's kind of creepy. And guess what? It's probably illegal under university statutes. Because Jordan wasn't a student at University of Victoria, so he couldn't be. He could not own or control this group, but of course, like the controlling, maniacal asshole he is, that's exactly what he went on to do. Look, guys, I ain't gonna lie to you. It says on screen right now, I know this is a boring video. Okay? I'm not gonna lie to you. This is dealing with vegan politics in the sleepy little town of Victoria, and I have the map on the left-hand side of the screen for a reason. What happens in Victoria is linked to what's happening in Vancouver, a much bigger city. It's kind of like a half-day journey to get to. Yeah, this says you could do it in 3 hours. 5 hours is more likely. Whatever. The point is, this matters as an anecdote in itself because this one guy, Jordan Reichert, made life hell for everybody aspiring to be a vegan activist in Victoria for years. I mean, I guess it's about 4 years now since he came back to Victoria. It's been awful. And I am one of those people where he's really prevented me from being able to do what I wanted to do. He's prevented me from even attending events. He's managed to monopolize what's going on here in veganism in a really negative way. And you know what the reality is? Most people who didn't like it just went and got involved with activists in Vancouver instead because it's not that far away. So I acknowledge that. But the broader kind of moral of the story here is a lot of people all over the world in veganism have to deal with these kinds of little Hitlers, teapot Napoleons, whatever you want to say. Jordan Reichert got donations and ran in elections again and again and again. This is the general election of 2017. He ran in provincial elections, federal elections, and then most recently in the municipal city elections. And he did very, very poorly in all of them. This election result, 102 votes. Like, dude, you should be able to wake up and see that you're doing something wrong. In the latest city election, in order to win, he would have needed to get more than 3 times as many votes as he did. That one's a little bit unusual because it wasn't one man, one vote. Everybody got multiple votes. You got to spread out your votes all over the ballot kind of thing. So, dude, the numbers are there that you should be willing to really listen to people about what it is you're doing wrong. Even though I know you're blind to the harm you're doing. You're blind to the really negative effect you're having on people like me. And, you know, it doesn't have to be that many people, because Victoria is not that big a town. You can even see that, actually, from these vote numbers. The total number of votes here is only 30,000. You managed to get 100 out of 30,267. I am not making this a popularity contest, but just take a second to look at these YouTube numbers, okay? You managed to get into the mainstream media by confronting the Prime Minister of Canada, which is obviously partly just luck, and you got 2,200 views on that video. That's their top center, okay? But guess what, Jordan? Nobody, literally nobody, wants to hear what you have to say. Look at the numbers on the other videos here, okay? When you don't have a captive audience, when you're not bullying and domineering people, nobody wants to listen to your message. And you should be able to notice that and take that on board. And as a career politician, change your strategy and tactics, your messaging and your method a little bit. And you can't, because, Jordan, you are a domineering asshole. And nobody ever says it to your face, and that's why you've managed to float along on your little cloud with your little circle of supporters and ignore the fact that it's not just you personally are a complete disaster as a vegan political candidate. You've had a really negative impact on all the people wanting to make a positive impact through veganism in this little part of the world. Okay? Here's Jordan's own channel. And guys, these numbers are inflated because I myself have probably clicked on each of them 6 or 7 times. I mean, I was coming back to this. I was wanting to know what was going on in local vegan activism. I was wanting to hear his point of view, even though I dislike the guy. He absolutely dominates and controls all vegan forums here, including the Anonymous for the Voiceless protests, including the University of Victoria Vegans group, which I'm going to talk a lot more about in this video. So I'm coming back and clicking on these, and you're getting numbers like 29 views per video, 30 views per video. Sorry, going back for 1 second here. The Animal Protection Party, that was your project for years. For years. And I asked you about it. You went through a phase, Jordan. I'm sure you want to lie about it now and pretend it never happened. You went through a whole phase of getting rid of the word vegan. Of course, DXE did that at about the same time. Direct Action Everywhere did the same thing. It was like, oh, no, somehow vegan is a liability. It's a problem. And you just wanted to go with this name, the Animal Protection Party. You wanted to get more support from people who were not vegan that way. Yeah, how did that work out for you, bro? How did that work out for you? 29 views on that video 1 year later. Okay, it's a sign. I'm not saying YouTube views are everything. I'm also not saying votes are everything. But yeah, you know what? In an election, especially an election where you have a couple $1,000s in donations. I don't know your exact budget, Jordan, but I've seen you spending money on these campaigns. You're getting some donations, and that money might as well have been flushed straight down the toilet, Jordan, because you're not getting results, and you're not even communicating a meaningful message. So I'm now going to play you guys just a 1-minute clip of what public speaking from Jordan sounds like. And this is only 1 minute, but it's so awful and it's so boring that, trust me, it's going to feel like the longest 1 minute of your life.
Non-human animals outnumber us significantly. Unfortunately, I have to say that with over 100 billion animals killed every year just for food alone, they're not well in this world. I would be the only voice, and I am the only opportunity for you and in this province to elect somebody who will be a voice for all animals, including human ones, in the legislature. That's a rare opportunity, I can tell you. So, I'll ask you to remember the cat that was here this evening when you go to vote. Because animals have a voice. And my partner reminded me that they do, because I wrote once, A Voice for Animals. But animals have their own voice. They express it with their bodies. They express it in different ways that we often claim are inferior because they're different. But they're meaningful, they're expressive, and they're powerful. And when we invalidate that voice, we invalidate a part of ourselves. So, I'm a representative for the voices of animals. And I'll ask you to vote for all of us. May 9th. Thank you.
And here's the sad truth. If you think this is bad, actually being in a meeting with this guy, actually trying to talk politics with him, like sitting around a table where there are only 6 or 8 people there, which is obviously what most vegan activist meetings are like, it's way worse. Because he's being a domineering asshole who won't let anyone else speak, and he really does talk this slowly, and it really does go on for hours. And if you wait for your chance to talk, you get to say half a second, and then he cuts you off and dismisses you and shuts you down. And Jordan, you know what the main thing I heard back was from the people who actually were on this campaign with you? They were so disappointed in you because you had no motivation, because you were a wet blanket. Talking about the municipal campaign here. Because you know, Jordan, we have friends in common. I knew vegan activists who really put time and effort. I think some of them also donated money into your campaign to support you. And they said, man, you just seemed depressed and vacant and vacuous, and you were just running up, and you just said nothing worth listening to at any of these public lectures. And as I said, you dominate all the meetings. Nobody else gets to speak. And it was massively demoralizing for the vegans who support you. No, not all of them. Not all of them. Just for the ones who talk to me. And I think they talk to me, Jordan. You know why. I'm the one who's willing to question your role as self-appointed dictator for life around here. I imagine there are 2 types of people who are really going to enjoy this video. One type of person has direct experience with Jordan Reichert, vegan politician. With this one leader in the vegan movement in this one town in Canada, and is here to vent their frustration. That's one type of person who's really going to enjoy this video. But you know, there's another type of person. There's a type of person who can look at this in a broader allegorical framework, where the case study we're looking at here, it represents something that's wrong with vegan politics, and maybe you can relate to it sympathetically from some other totally different political struggle you've been a part of, some kind of movement, maybe even organizing a concert. I mean, trying to organize anything with people where you deal with this kind of character who is an absolutely resolute, tiny tyrant. He's like the world's pettiest Hitler, ruling with an iron fist over details and making other people kowtow to his authority in the most picayune of ways. And it ultimately makes everybody miserable. And he remains blind to it himself. As you're going to see, he remains blind to it even when I take the time to sit him down and talk it through it and explain to him exactly what the problem is. He remains blind to it, most of all because he at all times has a small circle of people who enable him. In this case, it's his girlfriend and just a couple of other really cult-like followers this guy has. And I've seen it. Some of them really do have cult-like devotion to this guy and put up with his crap. And then there's a larger circle of people who will just nod their head, say nothing. And believe me, Jordan, those people, when you're not around, say what a piece of crap that you are. But they're not getting paid to tell you what a piece of... They're not your psychoanalyst. They're not your friend. They're not your enemies. They're just people like, oh, yeah. Jordan's doing his thing. Okay, good luck with that, Jordan. Hey, good luck. And they keep it moving, okay? This happens on all levels. So the conflict I had with Jordan, it really shouldn't have been a conflict at all. Here you see on screen, he says to me, I need you to state clearly what the problem is right here, because there have been no problems until now. You seem to be upset that I defended our position on the location we chose for the event. Now, that doesn't tell you so much about what the problem is, but I think you're going to figure it out within the first paragraph of my reply. When this was written, Jordan and I were about the same age. So let's say 37? How many years ago is this now? Something like that. And I was a student on University of Victoria campus where I was learning Chinese. I say to Jordan here, when we first talked about this, and I first signed up for the group, I said that I would show up and say hello to people, just to meet other vegans, etc., but that there would be limits to my involvement, because I don't really think it is appropriate for someone in his mid-30s to be controlling a group of teenagers in a campus group. Why would you be playing a leadership role in this UVic group? As stated, I wouldn't do that myself, and I really am a UVic student, whereas you are not. So I have never gotten Jordan to admit to me how it finally ended with this UVic group that he started. I sure did get complaints, Jordan, from students who were in that group. They got complaints, and they said they were mystified as to why you were even there. But the funny irony of this situation is, I was a student at University of Victoria, so I was one of the signing members. I signed at the beginning, so I was a member. I was a founder, and in a sense, I was one of the 5 people who were supposed to control and organize the group, right? And Jordan wasn't, because Jordan wasn't a student at University of Victoria, so he couldn't be. He could not own or control this group, but of course, like the controlling, maniacal asshole he is, that's exactly what he went on to do. And this conversation started because I wrote to him and said, you know, Jordan, I was a signing member of that group, and I've never been invited to a single event. You never told me what's happening. I was never put in the mailing list for email or whatever it was. I signed to join that group. And then all this time went by, and you intentionally froze me out, which is what you did, Jordan. I mean, to my knowledge, that's what you did. Because anytime you and I are in the same room, you feel I'm a threat to your authority, and you have to control a tiny coven of sheeple who will not question you, who will not interrupt you, who do not have their own ideas, people who will say, just like the people who showed up at the launch party for your electoral campaign when you ran for government, people who will just sit there and say, Jordan, we support whatever it is you want to do, and let you monologue for hours of the most mind-numbingly boring public meetings imaginable. And let me just say, guys, I'm not someone who finds vegan politics boring. I have a very high level of interest in discussion of vegan politics.
I mean, imagine that. Imagine if you took this world and you said, I'm only going to deal with human issues. That's it. Because that's currently what we do. That's currently how we got to where we are. And the other parties are saying, let's continue doing that. We're just going to change things up a little bit. That's not enough. We can't keep leaving them out. It'd be like living in the world without animals. Imagine that. Just try to imagine that for 1 minute. Imagine our cities, imagine our forests, imagine our oceans without animals. Where is the representation in our legislature for them? None. So imagine you have a moment here in Victoria Beacon Hill to make history. You can elect the first representative for animals.
But this is the funny irony. When he first proposed this to me, he said, hey, will you sign this piece of paper to be a founding member for the University of Victoria Vegans Group? I said to him, look, man, maybe I was 36 at the time, whatever it was. It's a bunch of years ago. I said, look, man, like I can sign this piece of paper, but I've got to tell you, student groups are for students. Like some of these people are going to be 19 years old, and you know, like if they know me, if they know my YouTube channel or something like that, like I can show up and be like a speaker or something. I can show up and say hi to people and leave. But no, I'm not drinking beer with students. I'm not smoking weed with students. If you guys don't know, I never drink beer. I never smoke weed anyway. But like, dude, student groups are for students. They're not for a grown-ass man in his 30s like you, Jordan, to try to recruit followers for his off-campus political group, which is exactly what you tried to do. In my opinion, you failed. Maybe you managed to catch one or two. It's not what I heard. I heard that you failed. And when I asked you about it, you just indicated that it was some kind of disaster. I don't know what happened. But it's really ironic that at that time, immediately, when I had no time to think about it, I said, look, I can sign this piece of paper, but my involvement is going to be limited. And then guess what? Guess what I find out? It's like, I think it's more than a year later. It was a long time later. I asked, what happened to this group? Many, many months later. I hadn't heard anything about it. And I said, so what happened to the student group I was a signing member of? And it turns out he did exactly what I explained to him I would consider unethical, what I would never do. So, thus, as stated, Why did you compose a message in pseudo-legalese? Why are you referring to yourself as we in a UVic student message forum? No, it isn't appropriate for you to be quote-unquote regulating a UVic group's Facebook chat by quoting policy statements and speaking in terms of we. That's exactly what he did. If the UVic club is, as you claim, controlled by Viva, it shouldn't be. So Viva is him. It's him and his girlfriend. It's their little cult group of their close devotees who are not university students, neither in age, nor were they like me, an older person who happens to be enrolled as a student. They are not students. They're not part of the campus. That's your own political group. And guys, anytime you have to ask yourself an ethical question like this, imagine it was some other political party. What if it was a right-wing group that was doing what you're doing here, Jordan, that was trying to recruit university students into an off-campus group by having an older man in his 30s? What if it was a left-wing group? What if it was a communist party? The youth wing of the Communist Party sends in an old guy like you to control a student group in the way that you're doing. You'd say, oh, that's kind of weird, that's kind of creepy. And guess what? It's probably illegal under university statutes, not the real law, but in terms of university rules and regulations, probably forbidden on campus, right? You're right, it is forbidden, Jordan. What you're doing was against the rules. It's supposed to be a student group by students and for students, not by you, not for you, Jordan. And it was totally obvious to me as soon as he did let me into the Facebook group. That was exactly what was going on. Not a front for you to pull UVic students into whatever meeting you and your girlfriend are hosting at Green Cuisine. Really think about the role you're choosing to play here. Yes, you sound like you're on the world's most hilarious ego trip in speaking in terms of we in that reply. Why are you making an official policy statement? Who is the quote-unquote we that you imagine elected you? Etc. And even so, why would you weigh into a UVic forum in this way? It's absurd, man, really. So I'm quoting him back here. Quote, UVic Vegan Club is a subgroup of Viva, so when there are ethical concerns raised about events we are hosting, it is mine or other administrators' responsibility to address them. He can't even be a member of this group. He's not a student. This is a student group on campus. You're not an administrator. You're not a leader. No one elected you. No one chose you. You're not supposed to be here. And again, even though I was a student, I refuse to play this kind of role. It's just not appropriate. And guys, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying it's creepy. I'm not saying it's it's against the rules. I'm not saying it's criminal. It's not appropriate. We have to talk about things that are in bad taste and inappropriate. And guess what? It made people's lives miserable, including mine and the couple of people who sent me emails or contacted me on Facebook about what a piece of garbage you are, Jordan. And guess what? In a city the size of Victoria, like 6 vegan activists really matter. You're not pulling on a talent pool of thousands of vegans. So if you're alienating and obstructing what a few vegans, like myself and those other people, want to do on campus, you're having a significant negative impact. And why are you doing it? For your own ridiculous ego trip, as we're going to try to get through here real quick. No, I spoke in the first person about my personal reasons for not attending the event in response to other students in the group. I wasn't talking to Jordan. I was just talking to other students about why I wasn't going to show up at a particular event. You have absolutely zero responsibility to regulate anything in this conversation. Zero. You aren't even a student. But if you spoke about yourself as a normal human being, first person singular, that would have been a pretty natural or normal response, no? Instead, you spoke in terms of we, a quote-unquote we. What do you think that means to a 19-year-old member of a group like this? Everyone could see how you're behaving when you make that kind of statement. Everyone could see you're claiming to be in a position of authority, and you're making it really clear that everyone in that group either has to conform to the rule you're setting down or get out, which is how you run all your groups, Jordan. That's why it is so miserable to sit in the room while you tyrannically run your crappy little meetings at Green Cuisine with your coven of admirers. Dude, I've seen how you chair meetings. It's not a democracy, and it isn't an open symposium. In many ways, I'm happy for you, and I don't want to discourage you. If you and your girlfriend are living your dream, go ahead. For anyone else attending those meetings, the situation is follow Jordan or get out now. And that's fine. But that's not what a campus vegan group should be. I'm saying you can do that at Green Cuisine. You can do that at the restaurant. You can do that in your apartment or a coffee shop. Don't do that on campus. Stop screwing up what should be a university vegan group. A group I myself would want to keep a kind of respectful distance from, because I don't think it's appropriate for me to hang out in a bar and drinking beer with 19-year-old students. Nobody should be looking at your statement on quote-unquote policy, phrased in terms of what we believe, in a casual conversation of this kind. Dude, how do you think that makes you look? I screenshotted your statement and sent it to a fellow student. So this is another vegan at the same university, by the way. I don't mention that she was vegan. I sent it to a fellow student, about 22 years old, a bit older than most, and she said that she laughed out loud at both of your statements. She also actually told me that she thought this guy was being a and that he was only there. But it's irrelevant. I mean, again, that is ultimately irrelevant. It's not about what's creepy. It's about what's appropriate. And it's really about having a culture of democracy rather than a culture of autocracy. And that's how you run everything. And I think a lot of people have had this experience in vegan activism over the last 5 years. A lot of people send me emails about little tyrants who run little movements where they live all around the world, making it miserable to be a vegan activist unless you want to work alone. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but that's exactly why I do not want to be in a position of authority or leadership over teenagers. I go to class with these same teenagers every day. I remember what it was like to have a part-time job at Starbucks, etc. Yeah, a University of Victoria vegan club is a good idea. Jordan Reichert operating it as the youth wing of the tiny organization he runs with his girlfriend is not a good idea. The fact that you think or feel you have to regulate a harmless comment, in which I very clearly said I wasn't trying to persuade anyone else, I simply said that I was not going to attend a meeting in a church, I was not going to set foot inside a church, etc., shows just how far off base you've slipped in your attitudes here. I really am not saying this out of any kind of animosity towards you regarding we spend a great deal of time and energy. I realize that you and your girlfriend do more work than anyone else in your organization, and I imagine that in many ways this makes you feel underappreciated, etc. Okay, so here's his reply. Our efforts to I can't believe I get the disconnect. This guy's known me. We've talked personally many times at this point. We've talked about personal lives, and he's answering me in this autocratic way. It's unbelievable. Our efforts to raise awareness of veganism throughout the community are our own, and we work to empower individuals in different areas of the community to take leadership roles on. Are you copying and pasting this from corporate letterhead? It's unbelievable, the disconnect between my down-to-earth communications guy, who I'm already known for, I don't know, at least a year at this point, and his reply to me, okay? We wanted to start a UVic vegan club for vegans at UVic to meet other vegans and raise awareness with, because this wasn't happening. It was, Jordan. It was happening without you. You moved in and, you prevented exactly people like me and real students from doing something that would have made sense for students. It didn't serve your political purposes. Why are you so mad? As the person who organized this group and who helps the president, yes, I have a role to play in it. You're not the president, Jordan. You can't be. You're not a student. You can't organize the group. You can't even be a member of the group. It's a student group, and those are the rules on campus, and you were breaking them from day one. And I wonder if that's why you never told me when I asked you in person, face-to-face, what happened to the UVic Vegans group, and you and the other people at your end of the table, you all looked real uncomfortable and tried to change the subject and just said that it had somehow ended in a disaster. I wonder if someone stepped in and said, look, guys, what you're doing here is not legitimate. Because it's not. We want vegans in the group to know about all the other stuff that is happening in the community, because there is a lot. You managed to make a spelling error there that normally native speakers of English do not make, but I continue. And we want them to feel included. I don't feel your responses are fair to the situation. I'm not on an ego trip. I'm just trying to build community. Using we does not have anything to do with trying to speak in legalese. It is that the amins who run Viva represent a set of ideals that quote-unquote we believe in. If you don't, that's fine. You don't have to participate. What that part boils down to, again, is he's making these authoritarian statements. Either you can get in line and obey, or you can get the hell out. That's it. Okay, so I am going to read all this. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to try to read fast. I don't really care who you showed it to or the response, to be honest. I have had people message me when they saw this thread in support of my position too, but I don't need to prove anything to you. If you believe you're absolutely right in what you're saying, then I'm happy for you. I have not insulted you or undermined your opinion, as far as I can tell. Have a good night. So I reply here, and this is the ultimate problem with the people who take on these quote-unquote leadership roles and then go mad with the tiny amount of authority they have. So Jordan, why did you bother speaking to me at all? You're not interested in answering any questions raised. You're not interested in hearing or responding to anything I've got to say. You start and finish by basically saying, I don't care what you or anyone else has to say. Okay, so why did you open the discussion? You asked me to state clearly what the problem was. You did that repeatedly, publicly and privately. And now your response is, I don't care. I'm not listening to you. I don't care what anyone else has to say. I quote back what he said earlier, where he says, I don't care about anyone's response. I don't care about your response or anyone's response. And again, if it's 5 or 6 people, it's a small university student group in a small city. Those are as big as the numbers get. And I reply, Jordan, you are still missing my point. 1, my direct point was that I'm not pretending to represent any we whatsoever. This involves a very small number of people. Thus, I was drawing your attention to the possibility that it really would be better for you, too, to speak in the first person singular. 2, if teenagers are writing to you to show their approval or to get your approval in response to this discussion, because you are the quote-unquote leader of this group, then please reflect that this should not be happening. No, a man in his mid-30s should not be getting messages of that kind from teenage students in a university group, etc. This isn't a faculty group, Jordan. It's a student group. Please really think about what an absurd situation it is for you to be soliciting the approval of teenagers on a university campus, or vice versa, for them to be soliciting your approval. You should not be playing a leadership role here of any kind, and as I stated last year, and stated again now, neither should I because I'm too old, although I really am a university student, and you ain't. You should not be playing politics or trying to get quote-unquote support from teenagers. Man, just pause to reflect on what that situation really is. As stated, I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but that's exactly why I do not want to be in a position of authority or leadership over teenagers. I go to class with these same teenagers every day. I remember what it was like to have a part-time job at Starbucks, etc. You really need to re-examine the game you're playing here. I'm someone who knows you personally. I'm someone who you know personally. We've discussed our divorces together, etc. That's right. I remember he had just gotten divorced that time. I was in process of my own divorce too. And you reply to me this way. You reply to me with these statements of policy, referring to yourself as we, etc. And then you want to delete any trace of discussion afterwards, etc., etc. Does that sound like democracy to you? Does that sound like student democracy to you? Or does that simply sound like the type of relaxed expression of views that would be natural and normal without a 30-year-old intervening in a student Facebook group? All of the attitudes you've described to me indicate that you're exactly the kind of grown man who should not be meddling in a UVic student group. If a group exists for people to be able to talk, really, they're going to say more offensive things to you with less reason, and they should not be looking at a policy statement from Viva. Viva is just him and his girlfriend. And who really is the we in public policy statements from Viva? It's just you, Jordan. Speak for yourself. Keep it real. So yeah, this is a particular controversy with a particular leader at a particular time. But guess what? This one guy made it impossible for me to participate in vegan organizations on university campus, vegan organizations in the city of Victoria, and at least several vegan organizations in the city of Vancouver. Okay? And Jordan, I've seen your YouTube channel. I've seen your lectures. You go around giving political lectures on veganism, and guess what the difference is between you and me? When you give lectures, nobody wants to hear them. And that's why you're such a tyrannical asshole. Because you need to have a captive audience. And when the people in the audience speak, you ain't listening.